Hi, I'm reviewing the JIANGSU JINFEIDA table saw, and it's supposedly a master mechanic brand, and I'm reading off the paper. It's a 4,500 RPM motor, and I think it's 15 amp, 5/8 of an inch arbor. The the thing that attracted me to this saw was several things. Number one, it had first off, I was replacing an old Craftsman 20-year-old table saw that had it was a plastic base and then an aluminum table similar to this, and it had one extension. And since the extensions come with these little gauges on them, it did have the ability to take it over to the other side, but if I did that, the gauge was on the wrong side. Not that I've ever in my life used one of these gauges. I wouldn't do that if I was cutting something to make for my dog, if I had a dog. So, the thing that attracted me to this saw is that it had three table extensions. It had one on each end, and I showed you the other one. And then it has one in the back, which is very convenient. Take standard saw blades, which came with it, period. So the first thing I noticed when the box showed up was that it had been heavily taped up, had clearly been opened and resealed. It was sold as new. So I was immediately suspicious, and as I opened the box, I documented everything photographically, and went through the parts list piece by piece. So the saw is supposed to come with, in terms of the major parts, of course the saw itself, which actually was there, the blade guard, which has a laser built into it. This is exactly as it came out of the box. It was already assembled, and it, there's no real way I can tell whether that was assembled by, a previous secret owner or if it really came that way. The next thing was the anti-kickback pawl system, which is fairly robust. I'll get to that in a second. And I'm actually reading off the list here. The miter gauge, where are you? Miter gauge, which is here. And the first thing I noticed when I started assembling the saw was this thing fits like crap. If I zoom in, it wobbles. I'm sure you can hear it. So it's not made very precisely. On the other hand, this is not a $2,000 saw, it's a $168 saw. So I've seen other people on the website bitching about this thing is so crappy, a big deal. Buy yourself a $2,000 saw. Okay, the next thing on the list was the rip fence. And the rip fence is, it's a $168 saw rip fence. When you install it, when you lock it down, the thing is tight, but you can't guarantee that it's going to be exactly what you think it is from here, relative to the rip fence, or from here. So, the same was true with my Craftsman saw, and so what I always did, assuming I had a piece that I was ripping something that was not a 4x8 sheet of plywood or something, in which case I would replace the rip fence with a piece of angle iron that I knew was absolutely rock solid, straight. But anyway, I would measure from the rip fence to this side of the saw blade, and the same thing over here, to make sure that the thing wasn't doing this. All right, so and again, same drill. If you want one where the rip fence is on roller bearings or something, and it'll be exactly the same, all the way across, buy yourself a different saw. Okay, so having said that, the next item on the list was a dado table insert, which basically replaces the one that came and was already installed. The next item on the list were the table extensions, which I have already addressed, and they seem to be fairly stable. And they come with locking screws. They're like thumb screws with plastic heads on them, and so you can lock it down once you get it where you want it. You know, you can lock it down. All right. So having said all of that, I verified that all this stuff was present, and then the next thing on the list was the pieces of the table. Well, the saw came with one piece of the table. That was it, just a piece of angle steel. The rest of it was missing. So, but between you and me, the fact is that I was replacing a saw that already had a table, so I really didn't want one. I would have just had two tables. So that's what this is. So I called Amazon. I actually started a return first and then called Amazon and said, listen, this thing came missing parts and I have it all documented and you know. And eventually I was able to convince them to discount the saw. The saw, as listed on Amazon, well, it was on Amazon.com, but it was sold by Amazon. It was sold by Amazon. So there wasn't like there was some third-party seller. So my first question was, well, can you replace this saw? Well, the answer was no, because that is the last one they have, and I needed the saw. So I said, well, listen, I will do you a favor, and I will take it off your hands for you if you will heavily discount it because it's missing, you know, a significant part of it. So they eventually agreed to discount it 20%, which you might go, well, you know, that's for the table. That's, you know, not all that great a discount. But the fact is, A, I had a table, and B, when you take 20% off of $168 with the shipping free, the saw was like $145. You know, I can't I can't come close to getting a table saw for $145. So there were a couple of other third-party sellers that had them, and with shipping, they were like $250. Well, I'm not doing that. So I said, okay, I'll take it. So here we are. So I didn't buy the saw to, you know, keep it in the garage and admire it. I bought it to use it. So the first thing I did was I brought out my, you know, because I didn't have any way to cut anything until I mounted the saw, I made a little temporary improvised saw platform, you know, to hold the table saw onto the existing table. So I bolted a couple of pieces of plywood, which I had laying around, onto the table, and then I attached attached the saw to the table using ratchet straps. All right. Oh my God, it's terrible. Well, the fact is, I can't build a permanent support for this saw, excuse me, this saw assembly until I can use the saw assembly. So my intent is to first thing build a stable platform that obviously will fit, and then bolt it in place. And then this actually will wind up being better than the original was, because these legs will fold and there are wheels on it, and you know it's seriously cool. All right. So with all that said, the saw, you know, when you get down to it, a table saw is a motor on a fixed stand with a blade, you know, that allows you to cut wood, and all the rest of the stuff is gravy. In years past, they didn't have any of this safety stuff. This does, which I appreciate and will install. But so my final opinion is that, assuming that the motor doesn't burn out in the next week, you know, or the support system doesn't, you know, fail. Oh, I mentioned this obviously has the ability to raise and lower the blade. That's this handle, and then this inside it will rotate the. Will move the angle up to 45 degrees. Same as any other table saw in existence. That stuff I obviously have not used it yet, but I did run it through its full travel. Excuse me. And the blade is stable, and it seems to be pointing, from what I could tell, it's pointing in the right direction. The blade's not bent, so it's not wobbling. The shaft's not bent, so it's not wobbling. And if the blade is not, in fact, perpendicular to the table, while I would expect it to be dead nuts on a $2,500 saw, I will just, move my rip fence to do what I have to do to make sure that the piece that I'm cutting is proper. So I guess that's probably all I have to say about it. If you can get one for $168, buy it. For $250, I didn't look at any of those $250 sellers because I wasn't looking to spend that kind of money on a table saw. I need to cut just pieces of trim and bullshit like that. If you're looking at buying one of these saws from one of the sellers that's selling it for $270 or whatever it is, I would look at DeWalt and Craftsman, and I think Harbor Freight only had one, and it didn't look all that great to me. But again, what I didn't see for anywhere close to this price was the three tables, the three extensions, and a stand, And so, assuming you get one that hasn't been molested, then I think for under $200, I just don't think you can beat it. So that's all I have to say. So I hope you enjoyed it. Hit subscribe, all that crap. Thank you very much.